Yeah. Hello, everyone. Happy Tu B'Shevat. Thank God. It's so nice to be with everyone here today. Especially on such a auspicious day like Tu B'Shevat. It's really an incredible holiday. And we have the Seder, the Tu B'Shevat Seder. We're going to be using it as our companion to learn and go into Tu B'Shevat more. I have to say, it's really it's incredible to be celebrating together, even from so far. And I hope everyone is doing well. It's amazing to see everyone. And hi, I'm seeing some smiling faces, seeing some friends. It's incredible. And today is such a special day. I know everyone has their gift bag, their Tu B'Shevat gift bag. I'm going to show you a little bit of what we have over here. We have the 7 species right over here, also ready to participate. And we have red wine and we have white wine. And we're going to go through the Seder and we're going to get to taste all of these incredible fruits and talk about the meaning of them as well. So, we're going to start. So here I sent some pictures before to Sarah, and Sarah's going to be sharing them on the screen. Here are pictures of Erev Tu B'Shevat here in Tzfat. Tani and I are spending Tu B'Shevat in Tzfat this year, which is really cool because Tzfat is you really feel like you're in nature. Here's some dried fruit. And the store was completely full. And what was so beautiful is that every time somebody at the checkout took their fruit, the person behind the counter said, Chag Sameach, Chag Sameach, because it really is a holiday. And there's a holiday feel in the air. Everyone is in the stores buying fruit. And everyone's walking into different fruit stores, buying dried fruit, really ready to spend a beautiful Tu B'Shevat together with friends and family. So I had some pictures of my shopping today. And it's really beautiful. I think because Tu B'Shevat is it's connected to the land of Israel, and it's about the fruits of the land of Israel, that in Israel you really, really feel Tu B'Shevat in a really important way. But what we're going to talk about today is how all of us can tap into the meaning and the lessons of Tu B'Shevat wherever we are in the world. When we're in Tzfat right now, and the Haggadah, this Tu B'Shevat Haggadah, it origins in Tzfat. It was made by 16th century Kabbalists, and they modeled the Seder, which was like 4 cups of wine. They modeled that, they modeled the Pesach Seder to create the Tu B'Shevat Seder. So it's very special to be going through the Haggadah in Tzfat here at where the Haggadah was made.
Yeah, one difference between Tu B'Shevat Seder that we're going to have and the regular Seder on Pesach is that on Pesach, the Haggadah, what we go over the whole story. Haggadah Magid means to tell over, and we're telling over the story of us going out of Egypt, which is actually what we're reading in the Torah these weeks about us leaving Egypt. But by this Seder, this Tu B'Shevat Seder, there's not really a story because it's more something that happens every year. So there's not really a Haggadah in that sense. But the structure of the Seder, we're going to have 4 cups of wine, and we're going to eat things in between that are symbolic. That aspect is what we have, and that's something that started here in Tzfat. Very special that we're able to have that here. For thousands of years, you won't really find anything written much about Tu B'Shevat being celebrated as a special day in the Jewish calendar. Only recently, recent in comparison to the Jewish history, only like 400, 500 years ago is when you see it being written about. And that's when the Kabbalists, which here in Tzfat is a very spiritual, Kabbalistic city. If you go around, you see how like The color blue is everywhere, which blue represents something spiritual, and you just feel it when you're here, and that's something that is something that brings out how like this Tu B'Shvat that we're celebrating, and it's something significant. Really, it started here in Tzfat, and it's very special for us to be here doing that, and hopefully being able to give that over to you through Zoom. Just want to bring out something special about the in general idea of Tu B'Shvat, because you could ask, let's talk about what is Tu B'Shvat on its own. What's the holiday of Tu B'Shvat? What happens on this day? So Tu B'Shvat is the day where the water because in Israel in general, rain is something that's very doesn't happen too often. It's a very big blessing to have rain, and that the rainwater, it says, only really starts going through the tree, starts nurturing from this year's rainwater on Tu B'Shvat, and it's when and it starts growing, even just the beginning of the growth of the trees after all the rains. It says this is when the rain is finished for the winter, and the trees start nurturing and growing from that. So that's what actually happens on Tu B'Shvat. Now, what's interesting, this idea of making holidays based on what's happening with the earth and growth and nature. So it's actually something that I don't know if it's something necessarily that people realize, but the structure of the holidays in general during the year, Pesach, Passover, Shavuot, Sukkot, these are all holidays that the time that there are during the year has to do with the planting and harvesting and going through the seasons where they're holding in that, which is like Pesach is where they start to cut the barley, which becomes ripe already then, and then in Shavuot is when they start already bringing the first gifts, the Bikurim, to the temple, and they start cutting the wheat on Shavuot. And Sukkot is called Chag HaAsif. It's one of the names for Sukkot. Chag HaAsif is when they gather all the harvest, all the wheat into the storage houses, and after the whole summer. So it's something that's interesting is that the holidays, the Jewish holidays, are really centered around the growth and of the land and the harvesting and everything like that. So that's something that necessarily people know, but it's important to point that out, because something very significant about the Judaism takes into account very much the fact that that God wants the Jews to work with the ground, work with nature, and to make things grow from that. It's something that because like there was a big discussion about what's better, to be in the desert. When the Jews were in the desert, wandering in the desert for 40 years, God was taking care of them. They had the manna we read in this week's parsha, and they were all taken care of. They had the clouds of glory around them in the desert. Life was very good. All their physical needs were taken care of, and they had all the time in the world to work on their spiritual growth, learning Torah, doing mitzvot, and being with their family, helping their family grow, which is something which is like, it's paradise. It's amazing to be taken care of with all the physical needs, and therefore to be able to focus on the spiritual needs. So much so was this way, it makes sense. That's what the spies, it says, that's what the spies, when they went to Israel, and they really they basically were trying to prevent the Jews from wanting to go to the land of Israel. So they wanted to stay in the desert because of this unique situation they were in, where all their needs were being taken care of, and they wouldn't have to, when they go to the land of Israel, they're going to have to work, or they knew they're going to have to start plowing the land, doing all the work that goes into farming and all these things, and they wanted to be able to learn Torah all day and things like that. But the end of that story was that the spies were wrong for trying to do that, because Hashem didn't want us to just stay in the desert and have all our needs taken care of. God wanted us to be in the land of Israel, be in the land itself, have to work with nature, work with the world, get involved in it, and to make beautiful things come from that. To not just to ignore the world and stay away from it, but to be part of it, and to make beautiful things come from that. And that's something that's very special and unique about the land of Israel. God gave us this land to do that. Everyone has that in themselves in their lives, but I'm bringing up this idea that there's very big significance to the working on the land that comes with living in the land of Israel, in contrast to being in the desert. And that's why we have the holidays are very much revolving around this the harvesting of the wheat and planting and plowing and wherever things are holding. And again, back to where this comes in with Tu B'Shvat, because Tu B'Shvat is just another holiday where it has to do with where the crop and the trees and these things are holding in their yearly cycle. So that's something significant about the land. Now, I just want to point out what actually happens on Tu B'Shvat. Like, what's in Judaism, the halachic significance of Tu B'Shvat is that something that's very unique that we only have here in Israel is something called Trumot and Maasros. That's something that only happens here. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah. Basically, the year that I came to study here in Israel, before, like on the second day, probably they like got us all into the room. They told us, they said, okay, so fruits in America, fruits in England, fruits in Australia, they're kosher, right? Any fruit or vegetable is kosher. And they said, actually, here in Israel, that's not the case. Not every single fruit is kosher. And we were so confused. We were like, what does that mean that all these fruits are not kosher? What does that mean? And what the teacher proceeded to explain was that in the land of Israel, the whole land is holy. And there is a biblical commandment of that most people in the olden days were involved in agriculture. And if you were a farmer, you had to set aside a certain amount of your fruit or your vegetables or your grain for the Kohen, for the priest that was living in the temple. The Kohanim and the Leviim, which are the priests and their attendants, they would work in the temple, and they didn't really make an income. They didn't make an agricultural income either. So they would be sustained from everyone else in the land of Israel who would bring their fruit to give to the Kohanim and to the Leviim. Now, there are some customs relating to Kohanim and Leviim that we keep, and there are some that we don't. Like, one that's very familiar is on holidays when they do the Birchat Kohanim, when they do the blessing, the priestly blessing. That's something that we keep till today. And another thing that only in the land of Israel they keep is to set aside a tithe, or set aside a part of the fruit and vegetables for the Kohanim. Now, this is done symbolically, just like challah. It's very similar to how we do challah. When we make challah, the challah itself is the actual portion of dough that we give to the priest. So what's interesting is that in the land of Israel, they do that with fruits and with crops as well. And only after they do that is the fruit deemed kosher. So the way that it actually works, I'm not familiar with the intricacies. Most people from America don't really understand it. Like, if you're in Israel and this is your life, then you really get it. Probably because they're so familiar with how it's done. Either you go to a fruit store where there's a certification that the farmer himself actually took a portion of his fruit and put it away. Or let's say if you don't get it, if you don't know where you're getting it from, let's say like you pick up a random fruit while you're walking, you have to actually have in mind to give tzedakah, instead of taking off a portion of the fruit, or some people even take off a portion of the fruit. But these are the laws in the land of Israel when it comes to fruits and the crops and vegetables. The portion actually has to be set aside. Until this day, they do that that's the practical way of it's practical. Practical stuff, and it's really interesting. So that's something that's cool about the difference between here and in the land of Israel. The fruits here actually have to be tithed, almost like challah, similar to challah.
Yeah, it's like the opposite. When you're on a trip in America and you look for kosher food, so fruits and vegetables are always the go-to. You can't go wrong. But it's the opposite here in the land of Israel. of all places. You got to be careful. So what this has to do with Tu B'Shvat is just like in taxes. You have there's a fiscal year, and there's the beginning of the year, the end of the year, and it's significant because you pay taxes on each year on its own. So too with this, what Hindy just mentioned is something very similar to taxes, where you're giving away a certain percentage of the produce that came that was cultivated, and you're not really allowed to give from 1 year's produce. You can't use fruits that grew 1 year for the fruits of last year. The fruits of last year for the next year. So where's that cutoff line? Where's the end of the fiscal year, so to speak? The produce year is Tu B'Shvat, and that makes a cutoff in the year. That's the official halachic significance to Tu B'Shvat and that why it's a official day on the Jewish calendar.
Yeah, there's also an idea besides forgiving the tithe from the fruits. There's an idea that the whole land of Israel is holy, and anything that it produces is holy as well. And there's 2 laws. One is that there's something called a 7-year cycle. You could work the land for 6 years, but on the 7th year, it's called the Shemitah year, and you're not allowed to work the land. You kind of have to let the land organically grow without working it. You're allowed to pick it, but you're not allowed to actually work it, which is very similar to the idea of Shabbos. And then there's something every 50th year, which is also very similar, where you can't work the land. And between taking tithes and between the Shemitah year, the land of Israel, like agriculture in Israel and the farmers in Israel, actually have practical laws that they still do till this day, that influence like the fruit and vegetables. It's very cool. It's very cool how there's really holiness from the land within the fruits of Israel. So yeah, it's very cool. So before we go into the Seder, we'll go into the whole Seder. I think the way that we'll do it is that there's a beautiful Tu B'Shvat story, and the lesson of the Tu B'Shvat story. Yeah, Cheryl Zeta wrote on the chat, similar to sabbatical. Exactly, it's like a sabbatical. So we're going to go through the Seder, keeping in mind a beautiful Tu B'Shvat story. And the lesson of the story is going to accompany us throughout the Seder. So the idea, it goes like this. There was a teacher. Now in the olden days, there would be one teacher. He would be hired by the townspeople, and all the kids of the town would go and learn by this teacher. And this teacher was somebody who was very, very studious, very book smart, not very worldly smart, not very street smart. He was very into the text and learning and making sure that the kids get the information. Now, the thing with the town's children is that they were a little bit more interested in playing outside, a lot more interested in helping their dad in the field. They felt like that was more like accomplishing than sitting and learning, and they really didn't have the head for it. And the teacher just thought of them as really like hard-headed kids. They can't really absorb anything. They're just whatever. It's a shame. That's what the teacher thought to himself. And the kids in turn didn't respect the teacher either. So it's a classic story. So on Tu B'Shvat, the teacher had off. He had a day off. And he thought to himself, you know what? I never really spend time outside. Maybe tonight, today, for Tu B'Shvat, I'll go outside. I'll just go and try to get, absorb the air and the nature and the whole message and meaning of Tu B'Shvat. And in his mind, as a teacher, the way that he always understood Tu B'Shvat is the time of the birthday of the trees. The trees should be growing. He comes to the forest and he sees these bare trees covered in a blanket of snow, and he feels a little bit disappointed. And he says, really? This is the birthday of the trees? The trees look barren. They look so bare. They don't look like they're giving off any fruits. All of a sudden, this enormous gust of wind comes, and it literally wipes off all of the snow off of the trees. And this gust of wind was almost like a message to this teacher, because the teacher saw that on each of the trees, there was a little bud, emerging, but not emerging so far enough to be hurt by the winter, he just saw little buds emerging, and he realized two things. He realized, number one, that the way that nature works is that even before you see a bud, or even before you see a sapling, there's a whole growth process that's happening that we don't see in nature. And that's kind of why Tu B'Shevat's in the winter, right? Tu B'Shevat should really be in the spring, where we see visible flowers and vegetation and beautiful things growing. But in actuality, Tu B'Shevat's in the winter because the growth process starts even before spring. And that's something that we have to remember for ourselves as well. It's a good lesson in life. And the second thing he realized is that his students were the same thing. Just because he didn't see, just because the teacher himself didn't see progress in the students, doesn't mean that they didn't have the latent potential within them. And the teacher realized these kids, they're like little saplings. They have life, they have energy coursing through them. And maybe right now, this day is not the day that it will grow. But over time, if I continue to believe in them and to continue to keep in mind that they have sap, or the ability to learn running through them, then they could really grow and they could really blossom. And when the teacher went back to school after Tu B'Shevat, he went completely refreshed with a completely new frame of mind. And his new mindset was more like, you know what? Not everything that is seen is the truth. There are things that are underneath, things that are the underpinnings of reality that are true as well. And you just have to wait and be patient for the seed and the sapling to grow, because in nature, not everything just sprouts forth in 1 minute. We have seasons for that. So yeah, that's the lesson, that there's a line in the Torah that a man is like a fruit tree. In Torah, it says that when you come to the land, when you come into the land, and there's going to be some sort of wars, there's going to be a lot of wars, make sure not to cut down fruit trees, because men are like fruit trees. And the idea is that just like fruit trees give off fruits and they give off lots of beautiful things, flowers, same thing with humans, same thing with all of us. We all have so much potential, and we also have so much to give. The fruits are our actions. The fruits are the good things and the good actions that we do. And yeah, that's the whole message in Tu B'Shevat, in one mashal, in one parable, that we all have hidden potentials, and they're all growing. They're latent, powerful potentials. But when they spring forth, they're like fruit. They're beautiful, and they influence our environment. All the good deeds that we do.
Wow.
So yeah. And we're going to go into the Haggadah now. So I know everyone has the Haggadah in front of them. Let's turn to the introduction. And we're gonna talk about Tu B'Shevat. We're going to talk about the customs later of Tu B'Shevat. First, we're going to get into the introduction. And everyone, there's 2 pages which kind of summarize the Haggadah a little bit. Yeah, and we also, even though we're on Zoom, it would be so special if this could be like a round table Seder. We'll call up on different people to read different passages from the Haggadah, and we'd love to hear your feedback and your participation. I see lots of different people. Oh my gosh. Thank God. Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining us. It's really, really wonderful. And I would encourage everyone to please put on your cameras so you can really get to see everyone, and call on different people and see who would want to read. So yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So like we said before, that the Seder is something that was introduced in the 16th century here in Tzfat by the Kabbalists. They introduced that they should eat different. They had 15 different fruits in their Seder. We don't have all those fruits, but what we're gonna go through is we have the 7 with us. We have the 7 special fruits from the land of Israel. There's 7. The Torah goes through 7 specific fruits that are unique to the land of Israel, and then that's what we're going to have in our Seder. And in addition to that, also we're going to have 4 cups of wine. They're going to be different colored.
Yeah.
Different colored?
Different colored wine because represents, we're going to start off with white wine, which is going to be winter. So you could take a bottle of white wine and pour yourself a little bit because there's going to be a lot of wine, guys. So yeah, we're starting with the first cup of wine, which represents winter. As we move on to the other cups of wine, we'll be tinting them with some red wine, which will represent the growth process of winter into spring, into summer, into fall, which is kind of like winter is like a barren tree, represents purity and innocence. And then by fall, we have these beautiful, full, luscious trees, which represent self-expression. So we go from into like through a process of self-expression as we pour more red into our white wine. Just like a fruit goes into, or a flower goes into self-expression as it grows throughout the same seasons.
Just want to mention something what's unique about these 7, specifically these seven fruits. What does it have to do with the land of Israel? So I haven't found too much about it, but there are some things that are mentioned. I think I saw somewhere that these specific 7 fruits it's only in the land of Israel you're going to find all these fruits that grow in close proximity, which is in general very cool about Israel, that you have tons of climates all in the size of New Jersey. We're here in the mountains in Tzfat, but a little more north there's snowy mountains, and then you go a little more, there's a desert in the south. You have like Yerushalayim, which could be a little rainy. You have like near the Dead Sea over there, which is like totally no rain. So there's a lot of different climates in the very small area of Israel, which is something which is very unique to the land of Israel specifically, and that's why. And you have these fruits that all grow in close proximity. That's just one thing I saw. They say these 7 fruits represent different Kabbalistic levels and attributes. We're not going to get into that, but that's another thing that's unique about these 7 fruits specifically.
Each of them also have sources in the Torah, and each of them represents not only just the fruit that they are, but also different attributes and different lessons that we can apply to our lives. Like really, like everything in Torah. Torah is full of lessons of how to live our life.
Yeah. So, Tu B'Shvat is called, actually it's interesting just in case we never clarified what the name Tu B'Shvat is. Tu B'Shvat, Tu is spelled Tes Vav, Tet Vav, which represents it's trying to say that it's the 15th day. If you do the numerical value of Tes and then a Vav, Tes is 9, Vav is 6, that's 15. We're in the 15th, Tu B'Shvat is the 15th day of the month of Shvat. So that's why it's called Tu B'Shvat. Just in case anyone was wondering where this name Tu B'Shvat came from, that's why it's called Tu B'Shvat. It's actually something interesting I heard that from now until Shavuot, all the 15th day of the month, which is in the middle of the month, is something that's going to be a special.
Half a glass.
We have Tu B'Shvat this month. Next month is going to be in Adar. We're going to have Purim and Shushan Purim. The next month after that is Nisan, is Passover, is the 15th day of the month. And then the month after that, we have, it's called Pesach Sheni, the second Passover, which is also a special day. And then the next month is already Shavuot. So just to point that out is something that's interesting. So we're holding the first cup. So we all have our cups with us. So the first thing that we're going to have before we actually get to drinking the wine is we're going to get to something. We're going to eat something that's made out of wheat. Just want to point out something that in these 7 fruits, there's 2 categories. We're going to talk about that later on, about the significance. But there's 2 categories in the 7 fruits. So we're just gonna first let's just name off the 7 fruits. We have there's
on page 4 of your Haggadah, you could see the quote from the Torah. It's in italics. It goes through the 7 fruits.
Right. Yes. What are the 7 fruits?
Okay, the 7 fruits are a land of wheat, okay, and barley, vines, which is grapes, and fig trees, and pomegranates, a land of olive oil, and then of honey. Now, this is really interesting. It's not just regular honey. When they say the lands of milk and honey, it specifically means date honey. So that's the 7 species clearly lined up in the Torah.
And just to put those into 2 categories, the first 2 is wheat and barley.
Yeah,
which we have
barley over here and wheat.
Made out of wheat.
A wheat cracker. We're not eating wheat, guys, but barley maybe. Barley's actually really good.
So those are all. That's one category, and then the other 5 is a separate category. What's the difference between 2 categories? One is grain. Those first 2 are grain. The rest are actual fruits. Now we're going to talk more about this later, but I just want to have this in mind before we start that there's two sections to the 7 species of the land of Israel. Again, the first 2 are grain, and the others are actual fruit. So here we have what we have here. That's made out of wheat. We're going to make the blessing together when we actually eat each one. These are wheat crackers, my favorite. And he's getting very good dinner ideas from the Seder.
Yeah, and the wheat and barley, really, they represent our sustenance and God sustaining us. We have here a quote from Tehillim, talking about filling us with the finest of wheat, which really means it's talking about how God really sustains us. God says he's going to bring us to Israel. He's going to strengthen our borders, make us a strong nation. Not only will he protect us in that way, but he'll also sustain us and make sure we have wheat. So, and to say the blessing on the cracker is the blessing of mizonot, and we'd like to call upon somebody to say the blessing either in Hebrew or English out loud. Let's see. It's kind of, let's see.
I'll do it.
Yeah. Thank you, Irene.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei minei mizonot.
Amen. Amen. Okay, it's delicious. Thank you so much, Irene. And the blessing of mizonot is how we start the Seder with our highlighting the wheat. So everyone will turn the page, and it's really cool. We're making it through all of the 7 species, which is very special.
While everyone enjoys their wheat cracker that they have, I'm just going to point out one thing. You'll see later on. One of the pages has the shechianu. So when we get there, we're going to. What's the idea of why does the shechianu make it to the Seder? Is because anytime you have a food that you didn't have in the past year, so then you should the custom is to make a shechianu before eating that fruit. So we all have. So we're gonna make a shechianu on, but just in case it happens to be that anything we're gonna end up eating here, that is something that the individual did not have in the past year, they could already make the shechianu on their own. Before eating that specific fruit, if they never ate it within the past year, just to point that out.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Tani. Okay, so let's move on to the barley. Barley's on the next page of our Haggadah. It's very cool. The way that the Haggadah is split up is like in between each cup of wine, we'll be highlighting different fruits. So now we're going to go to the barley. We did one of those sustaining foods, which is wheat. Second one is barley. Now, barley has many sources in Torah and Tanakh, one of them being on Shavuot. On Shavuot is the barley harvesting season, like Tani pointed out, how like all of the holidays kind of revolve around the agricultural land of Israel. So Shavuot is associated with barley, and along with Shavuot, it's associated with the story of Ruth. So I would love if somebody would volunteer to read the English section from Ruth. It's on page 6. And yeah, it mentions the next species that we're going to go into. So
I'll
everyone would
read
like
it.
to,
I'll read
yeah,
it. Kellyanne, yeah.
Tali, thank you so much. Go for it, Tali.
Okay, so Naomi.
In Hebrew or English?
Oh, I'm sorry. Should I start?
In Hebrew or English? Yeah, go for it.
Okay, I'll just do. So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest.
Incredible. Thank you.
Beautiful. Now, what we see from this verse is that you see how much life in those days really revolved around agriculture. That how did they call it? They didn't say it was the winter or this or that. The way they would name a specific time of the year, they called it, oh, this was the time of, like here you see it's the time of the barley harvest. That's something you see from this verse, and how important and how much the life back in the day in the land of Israel revolved around the agriculture and the things that were happening with all the things that were growing at the time.
Incredible. Yeah. Okay, now the next fruit that we're going to move on to is the olives. Now, olives are like just full of sources. There's plenty of sources in the Torah, in Tanakh, about when it comes to olives. The main one we know, we just came from the holiday of Hanukkah, right? What was the idea of Hanukkah? The miracle of Hanukkah, they couldn't just use, the miracle of Hanukkah was that they couldn't just use any olive oil that they wanted. They had to use specifically pure olive oil. And the way that it was actually done was that they would go, Israel is full of olive trees. Any hike, you just bump into an olive tree. They would take an olive, and only the first drop can be used for olive oil in the temple. Okay, that means a lot of discarded olives. They would use olives for something else, I hope, but basically it's just the first drop. And then also, besides for Hanukkah, is, let's see, we have this source over here about in Shemot. In Shemot, yeah.
Where there in this verse that we have written in front of us, printed in front of us, it talks about when God was telling, when they're in the middle of building the whole temple, God also said and gave instructions what to do with all the items. And he said that with the menorah, they're going to light the menorah in the temple. Then it was the tabernacle, the Mishkan. That's going to be lit with olive oil. I just realized that we did kind of skip over the eating of the barley.
Right.
The barley doesn't have its own blessing. Usually, if you're gonna make like someone makes some sort of bread or whatever they are able to make out of barley. So then, since it's a grain just like wheat, it would have the same blessing.
Mm-hmm.
But because the way we have our barley is almost like we had barley in a chalent. That's what this reminds me of. So we didn't actually, usually when you have a grain, you'll grind it, you'll make a flour out of it, and then you'll make some sort of bread, cracker, etc. But since we're going to be eating the barley, Hindy and I, depends how everyone prepared their barley, but the way we have our barley is in that form that it grew. So therefore the blessing on it is going to be actually ha'adama, which Borei Pri Adama, thanking God for the fruits that come out of the ground. Ha'adama means the ground, barley and wheat also, things that actually come out of the ground, not from a tree. So its blessing is ha'adama. Again, this is only because we're eating the actual barley the way it is. If we would have done what usually is done with grain, which is to grind it, make some sort of flour out of it, and then eat it in another form, then it would actually be mizonot like we had with these crackers. But again, since we're eating it in this way, the barley is the way it grew, so then the blessing is going to be ha'adama. I don't think we have it anywhere in this Seder because the Seder goes around fruits, not things that grow from not things that come out of the actual ground. So we're going to make the blessing ourselves on Hadama. If everyone has barley with them, if they made it, if they prepared it in any way, then you can eat it. And we'll make the blessing and have some barley.
Amazing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri ha'adama.
Amen.
It's very good. What can I say? I actually like it.
Reminds me of the Soul's Kiddush challenge.
Oh, it's like full of barley. No meat. Vegetarian. Okay, so yeah, let's go back to the olives. So yeah, they would use olives to light the menorah in the temple, and this was not only in the Hanukkah story, this was also every single day. The Kohen or the priest would go and light the menorah. And yeah, there's many symbolic lessons from olives. So in order to make the bracha of the olives, we have another bracha. And this bracha is probably gonna cover the other blessings of different fruits. So if anyone would like to volunteer to say the blessing on the olives, I'd love to hear. I'd love to call on somebody, but I hope nobody's shy.
Okay. I'll do it.
Okay, go for it.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri ha'etz.
Thank you. Amen.
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 I'll be honest, not one of my favorite fruits. It's up there, but not one of my favorite.
Olive oil is great. So yeah, thank you so much for making the blessing on the olives, and I hope everyone who likes olives is enjoying.
Yeah, it's actually just to point out one more thing that they have here about the olives is that an olive branch, we know that's the dove that flew from the teva.
Right.
From Noah's Ark, that Noah wanted to know if the world was all settled, chaos was done, and there was no flood anymore. So the dove brought back a branch of an olive tree, which again that's what shows on the idea of world peace in a way that the world is settled, the chaos is over, which with God's help, all chaos in this world should end speedily.
Amen. So now we come to the fun part. Here's the Shechianu. The Shechianu is the blessing that we say every time we either wear a new garment or are in a new situation or eat a new fruit. I think it's so beautiful how, like, even when it comes to the blessings, like something new, something fresh, we mark it with a blessing. So I know everyone here has a prickly pear. They're gorgeous inside. I didn't realize how nice they are. In Israel, they call this a sabra because it's like pokey on the outside, but very sweet on the inside. And Israelis are called sabras because it might seem tough on the outside, but inside they're very soft and
Very
sweet. So either take a prickly pear. We actually got some other really cool fruits. Persimmon. I have some persimmon slices over here. Persimmon, I've never had it before, but everyone tells me it tastes like cinnamon. I don't know, can't wait. And then we also have over here a passion fruit. These are gorgeous. In Hebrew, they're called passiflora. So I'm just showing off some new fruits. That was an exciting purchase. So let's take our prickly pear, and I'd love to call upon somebody to say the Shechianu.
It's on page 8.
Yeah, we're on page 8 to have some prickly pear.
Everyone grab your favorite new fruit that we have.
Yeah.
That came in your beautiful Tu B'Shevat package for the Seder. So I'm sure everyone has one of these special new fruits. Let's get it up.
Let's get into it. So yeah, who would like to volunteer to say the blessing of the Shechianu out loud for us?
I'll volunteer.
Go for it. Thank you.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shechianu v'kimanu v'higianu lazman hazeh.
Amen. What's the consensus? It's good. It's good. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. So while we're all enjoying our new fruits, reflect on the Shechianu prayer that even in our lives, there is always new moments. There's always new times that we mark. And that's always brought out through the Jewish calendar. The Jewish calendar always marks when you have the same holiday. What's the idea of the spiral staircase? It's like reminds me of the Shechianu.
Let's see, there's a lot of again, what's Tu B'Shevat is called the New Year for the birthday for trees. It's like a Rosh Hashanah. The Gemara mentions there's 4 Rosh Hashanahs, and one of them is Tu B'Shevat. So the idea of a Rosh Hashanah is that it's not like time just continues and goes on and on and on. There's a time where things are renewed. Like a circle. It's not just you going straight. You go in a circle, you end up where you started. Start again, like a fresh start, get a new start. But just not to feel like the idea, like we're showing in Tu B'Shevat, is about growth. So it's not that you end up literally where you started. You have like a Rosh Hashanah or like a Rosh Chodesh or anything like that. It's representing more the idea of like a spiral staircase, where on the one hand it is circular. You do end up in the place where you started, but you're a level up. And you keep on continuing going around and around in that circle, but you always end up higher and higher, growing more and more. And that's something that we see in any Rosh Hashanah in general, but specifically on Tu B'Shevat, which is the Rosh Hashanah, the birthday for the trees, which represents the idea of growth, which is something to take note of.
Exactly. All right, so we're now, just like in the Passover Seder, we always have the wine at the end of the end of every section. So we're gonna have our first cup of wine. So excited. It smells very good. So if someone in our Zoom table, our Zoom Tu B'Shevat table would like to volunteer to say the blessing, please don't hesitate. Is that a call? Okay. So, it's hard to see everyone. Roseanne Sahayek, would you be able to say the blessing? Either in Hebrew or English?
Please, if you can unmute yourself, let me be able to hear you. There we go.
Sorry. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen.
Amen. Thank you.
Well, this wine is good. Hope everyone's enjoying their wine.
Time.
Ours is from a winery near Tzfat called Adir. It's very cool. Delicious. Okay, so now that we had our second cup of wine, let's move on to the second cup. And our theme is going to be more fruits. So with the second cup of wine, what we're going to do is, if you still have some wine left, that's great. If you don't have any more wine left, you could add a little bit more white wine. What we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of our red wine and tint it to give it a little bit of a red color. With this, we're going to represent the idea of spring, right? We're going from winter into spring. And imagine like a sapling. A sapling goes from a state of purity, nothingness, just completely, just it is what it is. And then with spring, it begins to blossom, begins to grow. And we have this beautiful rose-colored wine over here. That's our second cup, and we're going to get to it soon. The next fruit that we're going to go into is one of my favorites. I'm sure one of everyone's favorites because it's so sweet. And it is the date. Okay.
Actually, interesting. We're going to have the dates now. Where do we know that dates are one of the 7 special species of the land of Israel? Because it says it's one of the things it mentions is honey. Also we mentioned Israel is the land of milk and honey, flowing with milk and honey. But what's interesting is Rashi points out that the honey is not referring to bee honey; it's referring to honey that comes from dates. There's a story how there was a lot of that's mentioned to bring out this idea that the land has so much honey from dates. We're not going to get into that right now to try to finish in time. But the one thing I want to point out is the Hebrew word for a bee, like bee honey, is dvora.
Ah,
And what we're going to read now, what we have in front of us, and it's from this week's Haftarah actually. This week's Haftarah, since we have the song, we have the Az Yasher in this week's parasha, so about singing praises of Hashem when the Jews went through the Red Sea. So we also have in the Haftarah the song of Devorah, which is the word for bee, and in this week's Haftarah it mentions the idea of Devorah, which was a Neviah, a prophetess, and she would also she was like kind of the leader, believe it or not. Even back then, there was a Jewish woman that was the leader of the Jews at that time, and it mentions how she would sit under a palm tree with dates and judge the Jewish people.
yeah.
So
That's where she held her courthouse. She sat under a palm tree, a date palm, which is very cool. It's a beautiful, beautiful description of Devorah. So we'd love to have Tali. I know we called on you before, but I really like your background. I see Tzadik Katamar Yifrach, and we're gonna get there soon. So Tali, if you could read us the portion from Judges about Devorah.
Thank you so much. So it starts off with from Devorah, the righteous flourish. Is that where we or
from Devorah, and then if you can go from Devorah and Devorah up here.
a
Yeah.
prophet, right?
Yes.
And I just want to say it's I'm doing a Seder tomorrow with talking about the 7 female prophetesses and how their correspondence to the 7 species. And so thank you. It's very apropos. And Devorah, prophetess, the wife of Lapidot, judge Israel at that time. And she lived under the palm tree of Devorah between Ramah and Bet El in Mount Ephraim. And the people of Israel came upon her for judgment.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Tali. So the second source that we have about a date is a source from Tehillim, which is Psalms. It says Tzadik Tamar Yifrach, that a tzaddik or a righteous person is as fruitful and as like flourishes just like a date palm. If you see a date palm, you see how there's like, it looks like a regular palm tree, but there's tons and tons of dates coming off of it. And the idea of a tzaddik or a righteous person being like a date palm is the idea that a righteous person is full of good deeds, and just like a date palm is full of dates. So we already made the blessing. So everyone can help themselves to a date.
been waiting for this.
Yeah,
all
this
the
is
time.
really good. So, and the dates here are really, really, really good. But enjoy your date, everyone. Very good. Okay. I think one of the cool things about the 7 species of Israel is, besides for them being all over Israel, the fruits here are actually more splendid than anywhere else in the world. That's the idea. That's another idea of the 7 species. So our next fruit that we're going to go to is grapes. If I could ask, who do we have here with us? See everyone. If I could ask Siona Rubin to please turn on her screen and read us the quote from Hosea about grapes. If you're available, if you hear us. If I could ask Mrs. Jacqueline Goodman, if you can please read to us.
Yes, I'm here.
How are you? It's great to see you. If you could please read to us.
I'm so happy to be here. So I found Israel like grapes in the wilderness. I saw your forebears as the first ripe fruit in the fig tree at the first season.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
Jadine, that was beautiful. It's beautiful to hear your voice and to see you.
Such a wonderful experience. Thank you so much.
Yes.
It's
So
like a trip to Tzfat.
Exactly. We wanted to invite
I
everyone.
miss it so much. I feel in exile here and
Thank
wait
you.
to return.
One day, hopefully really, really soon.
So what Mrs. Goodman just read was the that Israel's compared, that God looks at us like a grapevine in the wilderness. And we have written here something very connected with this week's parsha is that that something unique about grapes is that when you move the vines to another area, you uproot and you put it in another place, it has even more growth. There's a saying, Mishana makom, Mishana mazel. You change your place, and it changes your mazel for the good. So what God did was He uprooted us from Egypt, and He put us somewhere else. He put us in the land of Israel, and that led to the Jewish nation becoming so much more and really bringing so much goodness to the world. That's something that's unique. That God looked at us like grapes in that way, that He kind of uprooted us and put us in a new place, and it only led to bigger and better things.
Exactly. So everyone, please help yourself to a grape. And we already said the blessing, so enjoy. It's really
We
good.
do this every night.
Yeah. Or more like we should do this every
Oh,
night. So
I miss Israel.
You want to go?
Yes, I want to go as soon as I can.
and as soon as everyone come, we'll have everyone over. All right. So the next on page 11, we're going to turn to page 11, and we're going to get to the figs. Now, figs are really, really full of meaning and significance. On figs, we have the idea of, you see the first source is from Micha, and it talks about what will happen when Mashiach will come. How every person, like every man under his vine and his fig tree, everyone will all be united and together and connected, just like vines and just like figs. They kind of just like all these, the leaves and the fruit, they just go together. And it's really a reference and a foreshadowing to the time of Mashiach, where we'll all be here in the land of Israel, all be connected, and we'll all live in unison and harmony.
I want to point out one thing that I take out of this quote from Micha. We're not going to read it inside to try to save some time, but something that I always see when I read this is that it says, every man under his vine and under his fig tree, showing that it's his own personal one, that he has his own vine, his own fig tree. Everyone's in their own house, in their own field, on their own, in their own space. And seemingly it sounds like, we want everyone to be together. This shows that everyone's different. Everyone's in their own place, not with someone else. Because usually when there's a war, then people have to get together. When it's trying to bring out how things are peaceful, everyone's at home. Everyone's sitting in their own backyard. There's nothing going on. They didn't have to get together for anything. But seemingly it brings out a time where everyone is doing their own thing, not really bringing out how Achdut Yisrael. We want everyone to be together. So this just shows us one important point, that everyone, even though we want everyone to be involved in the same thing together, but on the other hand, everyone is different, and we have to respect and acknowledge everyone's differences, and everyone contributes in their way, because everyone's unique, everyone's different. God put everyone in this world because they have a unique purpose, and that's something that this quote brings out, is that everyone has their fig tree, so to speak, their backyard, their unique thing that they bring to the table. So the 2 points is, first of all, not to judge someone else for being different than us. And second of all, everyone should know that we are unique. The fact that we're in this world means that Hashem has something special and unique that we can bring out. Besides the fact that we all do the same things, everyone has their unique things that they also can contribute to the world and to society.
Wow, amazing. And it's kind of like the idea of every person being a tree. Everyone has fruits. Everyone has something that they can contribute and give. Just
to mention the other things that we have here, beautiful things about a fig tree, is that Torah is compared to a fig tree. Why? So what's unique about a fig tree is that let's say when it comes to grapes, you kind of cut all the grapes off the vines all at once. But figs, on the other hand, they don't all grow at the same time, not all ready at the same time. So what you do is you cut a little bit, you find the ready ones, you take them, and you have to come back and take the ready ones, and you have to come back. It doesn't all happen at once. That's the same thing when it comes to learning Torah. You can't just really get it all at once. Torah doesn't just happen like that. You just got to keep on learning, and then you get more and more knowledge. It doesn't happen all at once. There's no USB. You just put it and you know the whole Torah, and it's the beauty of Torah. It's the journey of just learning more and more and more. Just like we cut and harvest the figs slowly.
So everyone take your fig, and let's break into your fig. And remember, we still are counted for the blessing that we said before. You can open your fig. It's a dried fig, so give it a little bit of a check. Make sure there's nothing inside that's unwanted. And here we have a fig. So it's for you. And I hope everyone is enjoying their fig.
Thank you, Andy. And so while everyone's having their figs, I'll just mention another point that's interesting about a fig is that, again, like I said, figs represent the idea of learning Torah. Something unique about a fig, but a fig tree is that, like we said, you're not going to find it all at once. You don't cut down all the figs at once. You have to keep on looking for more and more, because more and more are growing. Same thing in Torah. When we learn something, we think we have it, we know it, and it's over. No, the more you learn, even the same thing, it says you should be learning. So like it's mentioned, the idea sometimes to learn like something 100 times, 101 times. The more and more we learn the Torah, the more and more we uncover how deep, and there's more and more deeper things, aspects to the Torah that we can understand by learning. So that's the same with the fig tree, that the more and more you look into the tree, the more figs you'll find. So that's something we always, again, like it represents the idea of, never to stop learning Torah. We're never done. There's always more Torah to learn.
Amazing. Okay, so now that we've done our fig, we can move on to the pomegranate. I just watched this video on how to properly cut a pomegranate, and it works very well.
Amazing job.
It's really nice. So everyone should take your pomegranate, and there's a lot of references about pomegranates in Shir HaShirim, and the reason for that is a pomegranate has so many seeds, just like a mitzvah, just like the mitzvot. I mean, they say that a pomegranate is full with 613 seeds. And there's been many times, like as kids, where you're like tempted to go and actually count and see if there's 613. There aren't exactly 613, but there's a beautiful story about the Rebbe.
And there's a saying that it's a saying in Gemara that even the Jews the Jewish nation is such a great nation that even the Rishayim, even the wicked ones, are mali mitzvahs karimon. They're full of mitzvahs like a pomegranate. Just like a pomegranate has so many seeds, so too every Jewish person, even the wicked ones among them, are full of mitzvot. So someone once came over to the Lubavitcher Rebbe and asked him, he said, how could it be? How could it be that a wicked person has so many mitzvot, has as many mitzvot as every month? How could that be? If he's a wicked person, how does he have so many mitzvot? So the Rebbe looked at him with a smile and he said, I had the same question, just a little different. My question was, if they're full of mitzvot, full of so many mitzvot, then how come we're calling them wicked? How could they be considered a wicked person? And that just again gives you that just gives over that idea of that there's different ways of looking at something, and it's always the best is always to try to give a positive spin to it instead of looking at the wicked. If he's wicked, how does he have mitzvahs? It should be the opposite. If he has so many mitzvahs, why is he looked at as a wicked person? That gives us that idea of trying to give a positive spin and to look at everyone with a good eye. So let's however someone cut. I don't think it was done as well as this. And he's the best pomegranate cutter.
Because I eat pomegranates a lot here.
Yes. However you have it.
Be able to eat this one like that.
Let's get some seeds at least. The best way, Hindy can give you some of my tips how to eat pomegranates in a more volume later. But let's just get at least some seeds. Be careful; they can stain very easily.
Yeah,
I'll tell you from experience. So I'm going to be very, very careful. And again, since we already needed to barach on all the fruits, so we're not going to make another blessing, but let's have some of this really, really good special fruit.
Mm-hmm. Pomegranates are like little red jewels. They're beautiful. Now, while we're enjoying our pomegranates, the quote from Shir Hashirim talks about pomegranates being in bloom, and underneath it, the Shir Hashirim Rabbah, which is the explanations on the Shir Hashirim, says, what does that mean, pomegranates that bloom? And it compares very beautifully how just like all these little pomegranate seeds, or these clusters are all tightly set, sitting together. They're sitting together like school children, studying Torah row by row. So the same idea of pomegranates being symbolizing 613 mitzvos, symbolizing Torah. It's just all of these 7 species are connected to the idea of Torah and mitzvot. So now what we're going to do is we're going to drink our second cup of wine. And since we made the blessing on the first one, we don't have to say for the second one. So our rose cup of wine, enjoy.
Like we said before, again, it's like already showing some growth. It's not just white like winter anymore. I don't just see it, already seeing some growth.
Mm-hmm.
So l'chaim, l'chaim.
It's actually really
Blessings for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Lovely. It's very nice to add a little bit of red to white. So now for our third cup, let's take our red wine and we are going to pour a little bit more red. So almost like it's half red, half white. The color is a little bit darker and we're moving on in season. We're really showing a lot of self-expression when it comes to fruits, when it comes to ourselves. And yeah, there's a beautiful quote from Kohelet, which is a book written by King Solomon. And if somebody would like to volunteer to read it, or if we can call on, we can call on the blessing. Oh, so we have a question. Why don't we have to recite the blessing after the first class?
It's a very, very good question. What he's asking is, I missed the name. Sorry. Irene, that by the Pesach Seder, before each cup of wine, we make a blessing on the wine. But by our Seder, we're not. So that's something that I pointed out earlier, that on one hand, we're having the structure of a Seder, but it's not really like the Seder of Passover, of Pesach, in the way that there's no, like, let's say there's no halal, we're not really having a shulchan aruch, we're not like eating in between, we don't have a real Haggadah. These are all things that when you have like a real Haggadah, that you actually say over the story, or there's a halal, or you're going to eat in between. These are all things that are going to, it's kind of like separates. It makes them 4 separate cups. And it's done on purpose that the cups should be separate cups. Then the blessing that you made on one won't count for the other. But since our Seder is not as strongly structured that there's actual real separations between the cups. It's more of one flow. It's just one sitting that we're doing here, and therefore the blessing on the first cup will apply to all cups. But that was a very good question. I was thinking of that before we started, and that was the answer that came up.
I think it's a beautiful answer, but is it not kosher? It's not kosher if you do say, I know the blessing on each cup. Would it be problematic? Would it be problematic? I know my Seder to say the blessing on each cup. Would it be problematic to do?
It's better not to, because each blessing has God's name in it, and we try to minimize the amount, since we have we have awe for God's name, so we try to minimize the amount of times that we say God's name. So if we don't need to say a blessing because we already made the blessing on the wine, so then it's better not to.
Okay.
Better not, because we don't want to say God's name if it's not necessary, because that's how much awe we have for God's name.
Okay.
So for the quote from King Solomon's book Kohelet, can I call on Sarah Gold Raphael to read the quote from Kohelet in English? Oh, if you're able to unmute yourself, if you know how to unmute yourself, so we can hear you.
Thank you, Hindy. Okay, on page 13.
Yes, on page 13.
To everything there is a season.
Yes.
Okay, it's like a Peter, Paul, and Mary song, right? Isn't it? To everything there is a season, and a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant, a time to uproot that which has been planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down, a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace.
Wow, that was beautifully read. Thank you so much. So there's an idea that there's in Kohelet, it teaches that there's a time to plant trees, and then there's a time to uproot, and there's really it's really incredible. It's very much connected to Tu B'Shvat, this passage, and it's also connected to the idea that this week, in this week's Torah portion, is the time of the redemption. The Jewish people in the story of the Torah portion, the Jewish people left the land of Egypt, and there was a time for them to be enslaved, and then there was a time for them to break free, which was when they actually split the Red Sea, and they went through the sea, and Miriam led the women in song, and every week there's a parsha which tells the story, and then there's also something called the Haftorah, which tells us a story from the book of prophets. So this week, actually, it tells the story of Jewish people crossing the Red Sea and being led in music by Miriam. And it also talks about Devorah, the prophetess who would judge underneath the palm tree that we mentioned before. Now, Devorah and her husband, they fought a war as well. And at the end of the war, Devorah also sang a song called Shirat Devorah. So we have two female songs this week's parsha. We have the song of Miriam and the song of Devorah. And yeah, it's really incredible that both of these women show up in connection to Tu B'Shvat, in connection to this week. There's actually an old custom that you tell children to feed birds in thanks for, there's a lot of different customs connected to Tu B'Shvat. One of them is to have all the 7 grains. One of them is to increase in acts of goodness and kindness, like giving tzedakah. And one of them is to teach children the story of the splitting of the sea. So everyone, what we're going to do is we're going to take your 3rd cup of wine and enjoy.
L'chaim, l'chaim again. Blessings for everyone.
L'chaim, l'chaim. And now what we're going to do is, as we conclude our Seder, we're going to get to our 4th cup. Tint your wine with even more red. So now at this point, your wine should be just completely red wine. And here we've come to the culmination of the seasons, the actual blossoming of the fruits. And then next season, next cycle, we start all over again. We have a passage from Avot de Rabbi Natan, which talks about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And I'm going to read this quickly. It says, if you have a sapling in your hand and they tell you the Mashiach is coming, first plant the sapling and then go greet him. It seems like there's a really strong connection between being in the land and welcoming Mashiach into the land. And one thing that we have over here is a carrot.
Yeah. So it's actually to bring out something that Hindy just read, and we're going to bring this out with the carrot, which is something about the carrots. I haven't really seen much of it in America, but over here it's a very it's very common. So what Hindy just read about from Yochanan ben Zakkai is that that even though he was told that Mashiach was coming, but since he had a sapling in his hand, he was about to do something that had nothing to do with Mashiach coming, Yochanan ben Zakkai said, "Go finish. Go do that what you're about to do. Don't just drop everything right now." Which shows an idea of, when you have a job, just do it. Don't worry about what's going to happen in a minute from now. Let's do what you have. And to bring out there's the story, a famous story about carobs, that it takes a carob tree 70 years to really start producing good carobs. So there was once a very famous sage named Chani, and he saw someone getting involved in planting a carob tree. But he asked him, how long is this carob tree going to give fruit? He told him 70 years. It's going to take 70 years. So he said, you're not going to be around in a healthy, as young and healthy as you are right now, in 70 years from now, be able to eat the fruit. So why are you doing it? You're not going to gain from it. So the person answered him like this: that you have this written in front of you, the last two lines on the page. He said, "I found the world full of carob trees when I came into it. As my fathers planted for me, so will I plant for my children." It shows this idea of that. It's very, very important to know that the opportunities that we were born into was a product of the effort that our parents and ancestors put into us and for us, and we obviously have the same obligation to do for our children, for the next generation, for the generations to come. Also, is that when we have something to do, don't say, "Oh, it's not going to benefit me, so I don't care about it." What's a very big part of Judaism is to know that no, we're here also to pass things on for the next generation, and to help them be able to live freely and proud Jews, and to practice Judaism, which is something that is our obligation to pass on. So even though he said the trees are growing 70 years from now, but it's something that his fathers did for him, so he could have carobs. So now we do that for the next generation. And that's something that the carob brings out. A beautiful story.
Incredible. I'll have some of your carob. See, if you open it, yeah. Carob is pretty cool. So by now we've gone through all of the 7 species, and we've enjoyed 4 cups of wine. And we're going to have our 4th cup of wine. But as we conclude our Seder, we're going to go back to the story of the teacher and his students, and recognizing the inner potential in each of his students, just like every tree around this time of year has inner potential. If you go outside tomorrow, if you enjoy the nature of Tu B'Shvat, you can't help but notice, but that the trees are not in their full bloom at this time of year, even in Florida. But that doesn't mean that they don't have life going through them, life that's ready to sprout, life that's ready to go forth. And when we talk about all the Sheva Minim, Tu B'Shvat is mainly a holiday that focuses on the fruits, not so much on any other vegetables or grain. It mainly focuses on the fruit. And the lesson of fruits is that fruits represent a custom. Just like Tu B'Shvat is treated like a holiday, we actually say Tachnon, which is like supplications, and that's like a part of there's like a part of davening, a part of praying that we actually don't say on holidays. We actually omit this part of davening on holidays because on Tu B'Shvat, because Tu B'Shvat is also considered a holiday. There's different customs of Tu B'Shvat, different things that we do. But in general, it seems like Tu B'Shvat, besides for being a holiday, is really just like a customary holiday. It's just customary what you do. There's no obligation to like make challah and sit down and have a meal like with most holidays. And the idea is that just like fruits represent our good actions and our good deeds that we do in this world, fruit also represents a custom. A custom is something that seems optional, but really without customs in Judaism wouldn't have that vibrancy and that life and that beauty. And there's many, many generations of people that tried only to keep Judaism to the bare minimum and stick to the bare bones of Judaism. But what Tu B'Shvat teaches us and fruit teaches us is that you need beautiful things in life. You need pleasures in life. You need vibrancy and color. And fruit provide that in nature. And our customs, our special customs, they provide that in our Judaism. There's a lot of people around the world that have never necessarily attended a Passover Seder, but they know, oh, my grandmother used to do this, or they know certain customs of Judaism, because a custom really like warms the heart and really ignites the soul and creates an emotional connection. So the idea is that on Tu B'Shvat, the main lesson of Tu B'Shvat is that we are taking upon ourselves to add vibrancy and passion and life and color in our Judaism, be it through a custom or be it through our own custom, or even upon something that we decide to do, to make our Judaism more vibrant.
That's beautiful. That's actually connected to what I mentioned. We mentioned in the beginning that there's two different categories in the 7 species that we have. I want to say l'chaim with everyone with the fourth cup. L'chaim. So the idea that there's 2 categories in the 7 species. We have the 2 grains and then the 5 other fruits. The grapes, the pomegranate, the dates, figs, those are all fruits. On the other hand, the wheat and barley are grains. And what Hindy's saying is that even though Tu B'Shevat celebrates all 7, but it ends up being, if you see in general, we celebrate more the fruits than the grain. And grain represents, bread, things like that, which are things that are necessities, things that you need, you can't live without. They're not necessarily things that are extras, the things that we need, they represent necessities. On the other hand, fruits are things which are more sweet, they have sugar in it, they're more tasteful. And Tu B'Shevat, the fact that we focus on more of the fruits is to really, really bring out, like what Hindy said, that it's so important that Hashem wants not only to look at mitzvot as commandments and things that you have to do, and it should be a dry act, you did it just because you have to, but God also wants, in addition to that, he also wants that Judaism should be something personal. And that's why like a minhag is something that God did, it's not a mitzvah. A minhag is something, a custom is something that even though God didn't tell us to do it, us as Jews took it upon ourselves. Because we take Judaism something that we identify with, and it's something that's personal to us, so it's something that we can enjoy, not something that we actually can connect with, not just something that's a dry act where God told us to give us a commandment and we do it, but it's something that we really connect with and something that really, in a certain sense, can feel like in something that's an extra. It's not just a necessity like the grains, rather it's like fruit, something that's just enjoyable, and that's really the goal. To really, like again, to have these customs, to really give life and vibrancy, like Hindy said, to our Judaism, to make it personal, to identify with it, and really connect with it. It become ours. So with that, I want to wish everyone. This is like the 5th cup, like the cup of Elijah at the end of the Seder. So we're doing the 5th l'chaim. L'chaim to everyone. I want to wish everyone a beautiful, beautiful new year of fruits, meaning in a way of that we should identify with the Judaism that we're living in a very personal, enjoyable way, and we should enjoy everything that we have around us in a very sweet way, and we should L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim, like we say at the end of the Seder. We hope to be able to have next year's Tu B'Shevat Seder. Not that it should take a year until then, but by that, since everyone will be able to come to Israel soon with Mashiach's coming, so then next year Tu B'Shevat will be able to celebrate in person with everyone this beautiful Tu B'Shevat Seder that we had the opportunity to do with you, and try to give you the Seder all the way here from Tzfat, from Israel. And so l'chaim, l'chaim, only
l'chaim.
Thank you.
L'chaim, thank you. This was beautiful and amazing to share with you from Tzfat.
Thank you so much. Thanks for joining.
My pleasure.
Fantastic. Thank you for bringing Israel to us.
Thank you.
For a beautiful Seder, Hindy.
Toda rabba.
And
Toda rabba.
Thank you very much. It was wonderful and very informative.
Thank
you.
Oh, you're welcome. It's so good to see Selma. Hi, Selma. Hi, Esther. Hi, Meryl. Now I'm like looking at everyone over here.
Very informative. Thank you.
Wow. Hi. You're welcome. Thank you for joining. It's beautiful to celebrate together.
Thank you.
And enjoy new fruits. Enjoy all the rest of the goodies.
Hindy, I would love to send you my Haggadah. And so I just need your email address. And I'm talishira@aol.com.
Talisha, I think I have your email. I'll send you an email.
Okay, good. And I'll send it to you. We're doing it tomorrow, 3:00 Eastern time. Okay, bye-bye. Beautiful.
All the best. And beautiful Tu B'Shevat, everyone.
Bye-bye.